Within the State Department is the Office of Children's Issues. It works to prevent American children in the U.S. from being abducted to other countries, reunite abducted children with their parents, and regulate international adoptions. Michelle Bernier-Toth is a special advisor for children's issues at the State Department. Michelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
This office was created in 1994, just after the Hague Adoption Convention. What is that convention?
So the office was created in 1994, as you said, to focus attention on two important issues. One is international parental-child abduction, and the other is intercountry adoption. The Hague Abduction Convention, and I should say that the office is this U.S. central authority for both of those conventions. The Abduction Convention is a very elegant convention in that it creates a bridge between different legal systems. The concept being that a child who is abducted to a foreign country should be returned to their place of habitual residence promptly, so that custody matters can be resolved by a court of competent jurisdiction. And the goal is to, one, prevent and minimize the trauma to the child who has been abducted, and secondly, hopefully, to serve as a preventive measure so that parents will think twice about taking their child to another country against the wishes of the other parent.
So let's talk about prevention. I know you work with the Department of Homeland Security, but how does your office work to prevent those abductions?
So we always think that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of remedy, and if we can avoid the trauma to the child, that's so much the better. So we have two important programs that we use to try to prevent international parental-child abductions. The first is the Children's Passport Issuance Alert Program, whereby we can flag a child's name in our passport system so that if someone, the other parent for example, applies for a passport on that child's behalf, we will notify the parent who entered the child's name, and we can then examine the custody matters to ensure that two-parent consent requirements are appropriately met, or that perhaps the passport can't be issued to that child because there's an objection. So that's one important program. The second is working, as you said, with the Department of Homeland Security's Customs and Border Protection, is the Prevent Abduction Program, where we can, based on a parent's court order that prevents a child from being removed to the United States, we can actually stop the child at the port of entry before they leave. With that program, we estimate that we can stop up to perhaps sometimes over 200 abductions a year.
So what happens tragically if a child is abducted, leaves the United States? What can you offer parents?
So the country officers in the Office of Children's Issues, who are really dedicated professionals who believe firmly and passionately in this issue, will work with left-behind parents to help them identify their lawful options for seeking the return of or access to their child, depending on the circumstances. If the child has been taken to a country that is a Hague Treaty partner, that's one important resource that the parent has at their disposal to try to pursue a return under the Hague Convention. If that's not the case, if a child has been taken to another country, then they will lay out what all those different options are. It might be seeking custody in the foreign country. It might be having their custody order, U.S. custody order, recognized in a foreign country. It might be a mediated voluntary return. But at each step, the country officer in children's issues will work with the left-behind parent to help them navigate, which can be something that can be a very difficult, challenging, and sometimes, unfortunately, lengthy process.
You know, your office releases a report every year on this issue of child abductions. One thing that stood out was that one country in particular had a lot of these abductions, which was India. Why are American kids being taken there?
I think, well, I would say two things. One is, unfortunately, India is not a treaty partner under the Hague Convention, and so it's very challenging for parents whose children have been abducted to India to navigate a complex legal system in India to try to get the return of their child. So we don't have, unfortunately, many returns from India. We have a lot of long-term cases that have just gone on. Secondly, I think we have a lot of ties to India on so many levels, in the IT realm, in medicine. So families have come to the United States. Sometimes the marriage breaks down, and one of the parents will take the child back to India against the wishes of the other.
Well, let's talk about international adoption. What role do you play in facilitating that?
The department plays a really important role, not just in facilitating, but providing oversight and monitoring. intercountry adoption is so important that it be conducted in a way that is transparent, ethical, and provides safeguards for the protection of the child, first of all, who's involved, but also the birth parents and the adopting parents. And so the Department of State, working through accrediting entities, oversees the work of adoption service providers who are operating overseas in foreign countries. And we work very closely with other countries to ensure that their programs, on the one hand, provide those safeguards to ensure that children are in fact eligible for intercountry adoption, and that on our side, our parents who are adopting are eligible to adopt. I'm very proud of the fact that the United States, U.S. families have historically adopted half of all the children eligible for intercountry adoption in any given year. And increasingly, those children are children with special needs. They're children who are older. They're children who are part of sibling groups who aren't finding permanent, loving families in their own countries, but they are finding those hearts and homes here in the United States.
And during the pandemic, a lot of those families were left in limbo because there wasn't a lot of movement across borders.
That's right. COVID-related travel restrictions, and also the fact that some courts were closed for periods of time, offices weren't functioning, it did have a significant impact on intercountry adoption, especially in some countries. For example, in China, which has shut down in March of 2020 and still has not resumed intercountry adoptions. But where we could find ways to move forward on cases, to work with countries to allow cases to be processed, we have done so. And I think that's a tribute to the fact that this is such an important issue for us. And again, we recognize how important it is to the parents who are seeking to adopt.
Michelle, thank you so much for being on the program.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.